This isn't going to go well, Chris.
I haven't got anything to say.
I just wanted to comment on the fact that this is the first time I've ever seen you training purposes.
That's nice. Okay, so before we get started, welcome to the annual Dufferin competition. Please have a seat, Mr. Rogers. Yes, okay, so before we, the teams are going to have 15 minutes to prepare after I announce the motion. I believe we're going to start with a short piece of private members' business, as I believe Mr. Finlay is the only person this year to submit private members' business in advance. So,
I didn't want to lose this one.
Take it away, Mr. Finlay.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move that this House wishes Her Majesty the Queen a very happy birthday on the occasion of her becoming the first British monarch to reach the age of 10.
Seconded.
Would anybody oppose the motion as an officially?
Yes.
Officially.
Aye.
You can make a vote against. Yeah, Niall back. Do you have a point?
What's that?
I thought you had a point. Okay.
What do you want to do? Are we all meant to bow towards her portrait, or?
I believe we sent a letter.
God save our...
Yes.
I thought we amended to remove any political affiliations from our society, but we do not honour her, instead we censure her.
That amendment.
Well, I didn't say we honour her, I just said congratulate her, but I think Slunch the Queen is a little bit political in itself, in that it's calculated to offend everybody, rather than only half of the population.
Yes.
In the style of NUS, can we please wish every monarch around the world
I'm not writing all those letters.
I would point out that Michael D. Higgins turned 75 3 days ago and nobody cared, so take that as you will.
Motion to congratulate Michael D. Higgins on his birthday, please.
Seconded.
Okay, so has the motion been seconded?
He was there with his birthday hat. Sorry, what?
Thank you. Has someone seconded the motion that we congratulate all of the all of the monarchy in all of the world ever?
Yes.
Of every birthday they've ever had. Can we show our approval with jazz hands?
Towards each of them.
Everyone. Publish an open letter wishing everyone happy birthday?
Yes.
Anyone second that? Yes. Okay, anyone against?
Even Hitler?
He did.
Are you against?
He did. Thank God.
Why?
Is the Queen of Pop included in that letter?
Yes, because it's been everyone.
It's open letter. We've just anybody who
I mean, we'll go for a vote. All those in favour of the letter for sending an open letter to everyone, I'm assuming on Facebook, to congratulate everybody for every birthday they've ever had, ever. Raise your hand and say aye. Aye. And all those against?
Is that really an amendment to mine? Just a complete replacement?
Yes. Well, the Queen's included, and it's an amendment. I'll try her.
This could turn out to be a lot more controversial than I
On a supplementary point, can I have reported in the minutes that the Literary and Scientific Society of Queen's University of Belfast did not wish Her Majesty a happy birthday on the occasion?
Hold on. No, we did. That's fine. She's included in the open letter.
Thank you.
I will tag her official account, not a parody. Or the Queen of Pop.
Make sure it's not absolutely.
Thank you very much. I believe that motion passed, so record that minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on briefly. We'll continue with the our sort of standard business after they leave. So, Dufferin competition, 4 teams, as you can see, all sitting lovely looking here. We are going to announce the motion, which I believe is. Quiet the doorbell. Okay, thanks for that massive build-up. The motion for the 167th session Dufferin competition is this house would put God on trial. Okay? And I have a nice way, could you please choose a position from here?
Always good
Just
to
choose
ask.
one.
I like that. It's,
No sitting on the fence.
I like that. It's reminiscent of a 50s motion. This house would have turned King Billy.
So,
Okay, let's do that.
you're going to have,
Said he'd photograph it.
anyway, you're going to have 20 minutes to... Okay. So, could everyone please leave? James is going to go and speakers please leave. Okay, speakers please leave. Okay, go. You've 20 minutes. Take it with you. It's really not like an IV where everyone like bursts out the door and it's very nonchalant. Okay, so another that. Okay. So now we'll get on to reading the minutes, I believe, from last week's debate, which was this house would divest from fossil fuels. Right, divest.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Excuse me. The 14th Ordinary Meeting of the Literary and Scientific Society took place on the 14th of April in the Senate Room and was attended by 18 members. Prime Member's business was heard from Mr. Johnny Finlay, who put it to the House that Mr. Finbar Rogers should be removed from the grand chair, still landing, which he had decided to place himself in for the evening. As it became apparent that Mr. Rogers greatly wished to remain in the chair, several amendments were proposed, including Mr. Stefan Ivanitsky proposing that Mr. Rogers should be allowed to remain in the chair for the entire evening, provided that he would be punished with a fine should he open his mouth at any point. In the end, this proved to be too stressful for the skittish Mr. Rogers, who stood up and uttered a string of expletives, for which he was fined. Mr. Rod Whitehurst then proposed that the House not speak ill of the drinking habits of its own members, in light of Madam President's previous comments that some distinguished members would be liable to get sloshed at the annual conversazione. It was passed unanimously. Mr. Ryan Neal then asked the House if the EU should rethink its Schengen agreement after recent attacks across Europe. Mr. Jeremy Muller asserted that if Schengen was altered, it may lead to decreased movement of workers across the EU. To which Mr. Harry Adair responded that the Eurozone and Schengen were wholly different entities, and this change would have little consequence. Further points were heard from Mr. Ivanitsky. He's not Dutch, I don't know why I'm saying that. Mr. Ivanitsky, who proposed a temporary change in border measures. Mr. Graham Alexander, who asserted that such measures could lead to a gap in intelligence exchange. Mr. Kevin van Blanken, who claimed that the attacks in Brussels and Paris were internal and the border measures were misguided. And finally, Mr. Harry Adair, who countered this by saying that firearms used were smuggled through the former Yugoslav nations. At the end of this productive debate, Mr. Stefan Ivanitsky put forward a motion to congratulate Poland on having the lowest rate of reported rape cases in Europe, which, for some reason, was not passed. Meanwhile, Mr. Ben Murphy proposed that Mr. Finbar Rogers be exiled to Calcutta, which was. President Sinnott then announced the evening's motion that this House would divest from fossil fuels. Opening for the proposition was main speaker Mr. Keelan Porter, who began by saying his argument was a fundamentally scientific one. He claimed that 97.1% of scientists agree that climate change exists, and that those who disagree are either paid off by oil companies or morons. Our planet has increased by 1 degree centigrade from pre-industrial times, and 1/3 of the ice caps have melted. With the knowledge that it takes CO2 100 years to leave the Earth's atmosphere, Mr. Porter claimed that humanity will be unable to deal with the consequences of not divesting from fossil fuels. He concluded by saying that by the end of the century, Earth may well be 6 degrees hotter than current levels, and that we must simply stop funding companies who utilise finite energy sources. Opening for the opposition was Mr. Jeremy Muller. He took on the proposition by saying that he would not be debating the existence of climate change. Instead, he insisted that it is vital that we are environmentally responsible without sacrificing the fragile global economy. Mr. Muller attempted to add colour to what he called a black and white debate by lauding the benefits of carbon offsetting, replacing trees as they are cut down, for example. He claimed that green technology has its problems and that it is not overly practical, nor is it particularly refined for modern use. He concluded by saying that we need to reinvest in smarter ways of utilising fossil fuels rather than divesting altogether in order to aid both the environment and the economy. Concluding for Prop Sister was Mr. Johnny Finlay, who came bearing 3 points about divesting from fossil fuels: that it was the right thing to do, that it was the economical thing to do, and that it was a conservative thing to do. He asserted that we must take a lead from the anti-apartheid movement, in that if we stop investing in companies to utilise fossil fuels, they'll be forced to stop or divest. Mr. Finlay then issued a rallying call to all Conservatives in the room and asked them, "What are you conserving?" He then quoted Evan Burke and sat down. Closing the opposition, Mr. Stefan Ivanitsky, who vowed to dazzle the House with something we hadn't heard from the proposition: visits. He informed the House that our solar cells, windmills, etc., all require fossil fuels to be created, manufactured, and transported. The idea that we should divest immediately was foolish and unfeasible, as it would leave us in an energy limbo. He stated that investing so heavily in green technology was like spending money on Prius to preserve the environment, when in reality, said Prius would cost an inordinate amount of fossil fuel input to produce in the first place. He concluded by asking the proposition to get off this soapbox. Questions were heard from Finbar Rogers, Jamie Cargill, Harry Adair, Kervin Van Lanken, Owen Mulholland, Harry Adair, Ryan Neal, and Graham Alexander. A vote based on House opinion was taken, which read 10 ayes, 4 nays, and 3 abstentions. And finally, a casting vote based on Speaker's performance on the motion "This House would divest from fossil fuels" was taken, which read 8 ayes, 2 nays, and 7 abstentions. May I take the minutes as read?
Okay, thanks very much for that. We have 12 minutes until I come back in, so you're going to have to talk to me for a while. First of all, we have announcements. So our annual conversazione, or formal, as people like to call them, is next Tuesday, which will be, it'll start in here at 6 o'clock. We'll have some drinks, which are free whenever you buy your ticket. £30 if you eat steak, £28 if you don't eat steak, or are vegetarian, vegan, whatever, pescatarian. So please, see me or pay Jenna whenever she comes back, and it'll be fine. So if anyone would like to come who hasn't already paid, just get in touch. Don't get in touch. Today's the last day. Never mind that. Next week's debate is Northern Ireland Assembly debate. So if you would like to be involved in the Northern Ireland Assembly debate, seeing as the vote is happening. No, not next week. Next week's debate is this House with. Apologies. Next week's debate is this House with John Mohammed. Yes. This House with John Mohammed. Come on with that. And we move on to private members' business. Does anybody have any private members' business? We're still on like 10 minutes, so otherwise we'll just sit here in stony silence. If anybody doesn't have anything in the news, any like mini debates you would like to have, anybody want to talk about House Grinstead? No? Anyone? Nobody cares about Grinstead? Okay.
Otherwise, the law
You
has
care.
no credential.
Pardon? Who's Prince? Anyone like to explain who Prince is?
Don't take the bag, it's fine. Google.
I mean, you literally will be sitting here for 10 minutes of stony silence. Yes, Hal.
I suggest we give him just a minute.
I mean, I don't think the crowd's really ramped up for speaking. But yes,
Are we, guys?
fire away.
No.
Right, go for it. Okay, you can time because I have a timer on with them.
Is it just a minute or?
It's just 3 minutes.
Okay.
Just 9 minutes, 47 seconds. Okay, does anyone suggest a motion?
Bernie Sanders has no chance.
Can we do a more light one?
Let's suggest one. That was what the option was for.
The one that our speakers, no, there's 2 of them.
This hasn't gone on trial.
Okay, motion is. Yes. Okay, this house believes Bernie Sanders has no chance. Shout out to Ben, who's listening on the microphone. So would anybody
Clean your dishes.
to start? Robin, yes?
No.
Time?
I'll time.
Will you come on it? Yes, go for it, Emma.
So at the minute I'm studying a module, and one of the elements
A
of the module
Finn.
Sorry. No, that wasn't.
Is crisis politics, and it's quite clear that after any crisis, a new ideology takes over. For instance, after World War, we saw the rise of Keynesianism. After the 70s, 80s, we saw the rise of neoliberalism, and now we're seeing a crash in that said ideology, and we need a new one. And what better alternative than Bernie Sanders offers something completely different to neoliberalism, something that maybe looks a little bit more like Keynesianism.
Okay, the deviation is that he can't win, not that he should win. Bernie Sanders can still have a chance. His path to the nomination remains open. Basically, at this point, it seems unlikely that he can get all the delegates he needs to win it, right? However, he could still block Clinton from getting the nomination, which could force an open convention, at which point the delegates would have free rein to vote for whoever they want. But his entire campaign now hinges on proving the fact that he is the more viable candidate who can beat Trump and Kasich and Cruz as opposed to Clinton.
So Bernie Sanders may be like old and like decrepit, but like he's representing. Okay, there you go.
I'm going to go for Bernie Sanders. Can't win because he doesn't have enough of an American population behind him to, even though he'd be the best option, he probably won't win. So really we want Clinton to win to take on middle votes to make sure Trump has no chance.
Trump does not have any chance. I'm just saying there aren't enough white men in the US.
Thank you for using up some of my time, Finn. Trump has a chance because he's being voted in by some people, so that's he's not been taken out, so there is still a chance, which means Bernie Sanders can't win.
Hesitant.
Yeah. Sorry.
Actually, I would use a historic argument to show that how in the past, when something has failed, we've had a new thing overtake it, and we had the 2008 crash. We've all been kind of waiting to see, well, what's the alternative? Has anybody got any better ideas? Bernie Sanders has come forward. We've seen it happen in the past. Something new take over. Why can't this happen again? Why can't?
Don't know much about Bernie, but I have 30 seconds left so I can talk for a bit. Bernie Sanders has come forward at a time of great...
First of all, I'm pretty sure you're banned from ever playing this game again.
Yes!
Bernie Sanders cannot win the nomination, and let me tell you why. It's not mathematically impossible for him to get there. But the numbers... As the 30 seconds been up here, I would really love to win one of these games. So, basically, all I have to do is make sure nobody interrupts me. Yay!
I mean, it was a very valid question though, and you started the debate saying Bernie Sanders has no numerical chance of winning, and then your point was he literally has no numerical chance of winning. But I mean, well done for dragging it out for 3 minutes. That was great. Anyone else have a motion? No. Yes, Owen?
This house is excited for B9.
No.
Brittany's like top.
Okay. How about something that we did? The Litter Effect didn't have a chance to. I suppose we do this weekend. To talk about the 1916 centenary. People wanted a motion on that nobody sort of brought up at the time. Does anyone? Yes, Owen?
Or B9.
I mean, that would be a good,
That's your second.
just the 10 seconds,
Sure.
What about Brexit?
Brexit, yeah. Okay. This house would vote for Brexit. And want to start? Or, sorry, British, what is it? BRNI exit? Yes, apologies. We have approved that. We've changed the terminology for here. Does anyone like to start that, Owen?
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, Brexit is a collaboration of 2 words, Britain and exit. It took me exactly 6 months to figure that out. I thought it was a typo, what's the motion? This house for Brexit.
This house is good for
definitely not Brexit, let's be real, because we have so much opportunity in the land of freedom, So we can travel Poland or somewhere else in Europe. Ireland. And like, it's all free. And we don't have to get like passports and all that kind of thing.
Yes,
Yes, I wouldn't leave the European Union. I'm not going to use this terrible minimum for this situation that we're in, because will somebody please think of the farmers and all the money that they get from the EU. So much of the money that these people receive, well, I said money twice. It comes from the EU, and they clearly would not be able to continue their current lifestyle and whatnot as it is without the money coming from the countries over to our right. Come on, anyone? What like someone who spoke last week?
Go.
Yeah, those farmers grow like cows and sheep and corn. And like without that, we'll all die of starvation. Pull for all. And I guess we sort of have to learn from the Kardashians' church. So the Christian Community Church in California, which stands for many sort of core Christian values, but sort of promote Brexit in a way. Which is the opposite of what I want to talk about. Sounds like
a long time. Anybody want to call them out on divination? No. Emma, you brought the motion.
Okay.
So, Brexit. This house would vote to Brexit because actually the EU has a lot of barriers to entry in the marketplace and actually helps corporations get bigger, stops the little man doing well.
Hesitation.
I'm not for Brexit, I just keep showing that out.
This house would not vote for Brexit as the unknown is very scary in any context. It's very difficult to know what might happen. Of course, in the past, as I was learning today in my Irish politics class, the Irish land has been
class as well.
This house would not Brexit because
hesitation. This house
Brexit is not a verb.
because time is running out and
Brexit is not a verb.
no one else is speaking. What do you want me to do?
That's a fair point. We have a minute and 19 seconds left before they come in. So, any thoughts on the motion? On our motion, I mean? Just the Dufferin motion? What is it again?
I want to give it to you when you want to do it.
They shouldn't be in the room. But apologies.
That's right. We're the government.
First motion or the last motion?
Damn it.
That's true. Apologies. Apologies. Okay, right. We'll move on to, I think. I'm not reading out the suggestions. President's questions. Has anyone got any of those?
1 minute.
Yes.
Madam President, what did you have for breakfast? You had apple juice today.
I did have apple juice today because Owen spat apple on me while I was walking through tunnel. What did I have for breakfast? Don't know. That bacon and eggs there about half an hour ago. I was doing an assignment, had an assignment due at 2 o'clock today, so I was setting up all my ish. Yes, any other president's questions about the society? Yes.
Are you happy to have a pod down for the Association?
I think I'll.
And
yes.
Are you getting a friend to do that, or are you going somewhere to get them?
I think I'm going somewhere because I got like a £30 date up in Metro.
Is it good?
Yeah, good. Did my eyebrows last time on a quick page? Yes, sir.
Margaret was having a chat.
What's crack for after this debate? Is anybody going to track or?
We're going to the house bar. Robbie has invited us all out with him as well, though.
Crown.
Robbie said he was working tonight. I don't know.
He gets lost.
not acceptable term. We discussed that in private members' business. Thank you.
You want to comment?
All ages.
What's our acceptable terms? Can we still use wankered? Or is that not okay?
Whoa, fine.
What was the premise for like not using slosh?
I don't know. I said that Lily was drunk last year and he told me off for it for some reason, but she wasn't.
You accused her of going to get us.
I said Lily was going to get drunk this year, which I don't believe. She's literally told me that she is. So I don't believe it was slander in any way. And I rejected that. on what planet I would say the word slosh, but apparently I do.
Always enunciate everyone.
I'll review the tapes.
Please do, please do. Okay, while we get started on today's motion, I will introduce the rules for today's debate, okay? So,
Closing up.
yeah, or just like
No relation with there.
yeah, no, that beats okay. Opening gov from here. Okay, opening gov, closing gov, opening up, closing up. Thanks, Ralph. Okay, so we're into this debate. It is VP style debate, as you've seen that we sat for 15 minutes while they prepared. So 7 minutes VPs, the game first and last minute are protected. You will hear that by me banging on the table. As I said, I forgot to bang. Apologies. So yes, bang on the table. If you would like to make a point of information, this doesn't usually happen in VP debates, but if you really if the audience want to make a point of information, please do make a brief, which is something that doesn't really happen in normal VP style debates. Please leave an appropriate amount of time between points of information. So stand up and say hello, point to the man. And yeah, leave amount of time so that you won't hear shouts of no barking from anybody else. Owen, James and myself are going to judge the debate today, so I believe there's a bribe box at the back if anybody wants to, it's literally labelled bribes. If anybody would like to go and put one of those in. And on that note, I think I would like to invite the Prime Minister to open the debate for this evening.
My lords, ladies, gentlemen, and Whitehurst. Since the Second World War and the formation of the United Nations, we have held that there are just some things that are unacceptable. Even in times of war, there are certain rules and standards that must be maintained and adhered to. After the Second World War, we put leading Nazis on trial. After the Iraq War, we put Saddam Hussein on trial. We fought the Iraq War in order to put Saddam Hussein on trial and remove him from power. We hold it as a standard that the use of chemical weapons, for example, against civilians is unacceptable. Why should the use of a plague of locusts be any different? Surely that should be held to the same standard. The bombing of Dresden, Hiroshima and Nagasaki are to us in the liberal West, even though that was kind of our fault, now horrific to us. They're a cause for us to look back in shame. We might have looked forward thinking it was necessary, but we look back, undoubtedly, in shame. Fearful of how politics can become dangerous, and how when governments and leaders, kings and kaisers, are trusted too much, they become a threat.
On that point, sir?
Yes.
Could you outline your rationale for treating God as a politician or a leader like any other?
I'm getting to that point just now. Surely the destruction of the Tower of Babel should be thought of in the same way. The burning of Sodom and of Gomorrah must be held to the same standard, even if Foster says no to sodomy. As my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, will elaborate on, if we do not hold the King of Heaven to the same standard that we would hold any other Kaiser, Tsar, or Ayatollah, how could we possibly claim credibility when the next action of some wretched head of state offends our moral core? Man makes law, and we generally hold that no man is above the law. And since God created man in his own image, surely it is clear that power has gone to Jehovah's head, just as it did to Wilhelm II, just as it did to Hitler, and just as it did to Arthur Scargill. From 1914 to the present day, international action has been taken to remove from power governments and leaders, even leaders of churches, who we judge to have acted unlawfully and in a way that is morally wrong. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Why would you say that the UN or any international regime has jurisdiction in terms of legal jurisdiction over heaven?
Because of... Well... I mean, firstly, I would like to ask you in your speech to define what heaven is. I find it very unlikely that it's on a cloud somewhere. If we think God created an entire universe, why do we also think He created this whole other place, which is wonderful? How selfish are we? When we die, we'll probably just end up in a small room somewhere in Bournemouth. The United Nations has jurisdiction over this because of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, because of the doctrines passed after the Second World War for this very reason. And if we don't uphold it in every single case, because the law must be applied equally, the law then has no credibility if it is unequal. And it topples. How in the fight against ISIS, and ISIL, and Daesh, and whatever you want to call them, provisional Islamic State or whatever.
Point, sir.
How can we claim credibility against them? One second. If they throw homosexuals from rooftops and kill journalists, is God not guilty of similar things? If we've read the Old Testament, I'll take your point now.
Exactly, it's about what you just said on the Old Testament. Are we talking about the Christian God? And what is your justification for that?
Well, really, I think we can just all count them as one. My own personal view is there's probably a Calvinist of them. But there's a Judeo, seeing as we are in Ireland and in Europe and the West, I think we can subcount the Judeo-Christian God. If we start blaming governments, they get a bit touchy. And with that, I will hand over.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I would like to welcome the Leader of the Opposition.
Honourable friends, thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to begin with Sunderland. In relation to your excellent opening, Mr. Rogers, it seems that you sort of make some assumptions and such. I've already mentioned my point about jurisdiction, which you still have not elaborated on. After all, God, in the sense that He is a deity, is not of this world. Why would we, as mere humans, have legal jurisdiction over His realm? Now, you also seem to brush over the idea that we have free will. We make choices for ourselves. You have never elaborated on this. Why not? But, I digress. I would like to build on this idea of putting God on trial. In a physical sense, there are many, many issues with this. For a start, I've already mentioned the jurisdiction. How did we get him here? We needed an address for a summons.
On that one, sir.
I was first minute.
On that point, sir. Have you ever watched the film Miracle on 34th Street?
So, how would we get him here? And what would we do to restrain him? He is a deity. He may be a spirit. He may be all around us. How do we put him in the trial box? So you haven't elaborated on that. So what would we do, and Mr. Finley's going to elaborate on this, whenever we actually convict him? We're going to say, bold, and then what do we do? Do we lock him up in a cell? And I even made the assumption that it's a him. And again, you haven't elaborated on which God you're talking about. You say they're all gods. Well, does that include, Satan? Because in the Ezekiel community, Satan is one of the gods. There is a lot you could say about that. So, you mentioned as well the rules and standards in warfare. This is a point of rebuttal upon this first. I don't know what sort of wars that you have fought in, Mr. Rogers, but there are no rules and no standards in conflict. The Iraq War you mentioned was merely for putting Saddam Hussein on trial. I'm sure there are a lot of people in here that would question. Also, the plague of locusts you mentioned. You're taking this without any evidence. We are talking about a trial. We are talking about a trial, after all, based on empirical evidence. You're an empiricist, yes?
On that point, sir,
Yes.
it is written in the very book that you go into court, and when you were on trial, place your hand upon and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Well, I would argue there's an irony in that. So, you're taking the word of a book that's been written over, what is it now, 2,000 years old? The plague of locusts you actually mentioned was based on eyewitness accounts, correct?
Yeah.
So, what do you say to that, I say? We also must look at the chance of conviction. I mean, there's an awful lot of evidence to consider, over 2,000 years worth. So, it would be a very long trial, if anything, again adding to the difficulties of logistics. I've already mentioned what we would do to him. And it would also bring the court itself into disrepute if we were to fail in this conviction. It would be throwing the gates open to anybody to make any sort of crime because we can't convict God. So, in that sense, it seems silly. But nevertheless, we must always remember that God is indeed partly a figment of our imaginations. I would bring in David Hume here, who talks about the natural history of religion as an almost necessary part of our natural lives. And the argument can be made that it is indeed a fictional character. So how can we put a fictional character on trial? Now this is obviously quite coming from a quite agnostic/atheist point of view. But then again, we also have to bring in all the different variations of God. I mentioned this at the beginning as well. There's an awful lot that people would consider God. Some consider the sun to be God. What would we do then? Would we put a star on trial?
I can reiterate my point. I did narrow down to the Judeo-Christian God, not the pagan God or this fine spaghetti monster or L. 100.
No, I'm not going to ever mention Judeo-Christianity at all.
I did. Can I go back first? You can carry.
But, okay, right, you've mentioned Judeo-Christianity. Okay. Well, some people don't consider the Judeo-Christian gods as gods. So you're talking about the UN here. You're talking about the UN here, who are supposed to be equal, so we have to take the opinions of everybody into this. So, in that case, what do we do if the sun, as God, has to go on trial? Which actually demonstrates my point as well. You know, it can be a fictional, it can be a thing that has no thought, it can be anything, in fact. To put everything on trial? I certainly do not think so. And on that, I will digress.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for the opening government.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Before I get stuck in, I'd like to make some points of rebuttal. I believe, although it was eloquent, I think there's a numerous amount of contradictions between what was argued here. He cites the legal jurisdiction over whatever realm the organisation of God might exist in. However, that shouldn't stop us from going halfway across the planet. We're humans. We're quite practical. We're quite innovative. So it doesn't explain why we wouldn't at least try to. And that really gets into his main argument. That is that this is plagued with practical problems about putting the organisation of God on trial. However, first he cites that it would be impossible to indict him. However, what we see and what is distributed around the planet today is the world's best-selling confession, realistically. I mean, the red lines that the Prime Minister mentioned, such as using biological weapons on citizens, torture, creating Kim Kardashian, these are not things that we should hold, these are things that we must hold to account. And finally, he also invokes what entity would we put on trial. A man, I believe,
in nature might be God, and one man might believe that it's his cousin. We aren't here to judge. However, we invoked the International Criminal Court and other international organisations that would realistically be used to host this trial. That means we could assume that the organisation of God, not as an ideology, as an amorphous entity, but rather as an office, or maybe a title, and that is held by an individual. And that would be who we would hold on trial. So, my major argument is two. Has 2 points. The first of all, it would be essential if we are to subscribe to the values that are in the basis of the UN and other parts of international law. And if we didn't do it, we would fundamentally do a disservice to our own stated principles. And second of all, this trial is necessary. If what is described in the holy books as what actually transpired, there must be more to the story than the culprit's confession. We must work into it. So, can we check in?
On that point,
Sure. One more.
was God, as in the Judeo-Christian God that Mr. Rogers mentioned initially, did he not warn the people that their actions would bring these consequences?
Yes, I understand your statement. Saddam Hussein warned the Kurds before he invaded. That doesn't quite make him innocent of genocide. Alright, so that point's So, our human understanding of justice is based on fundamental, universal values. This was accepted post-World War II, as the Prime Minister has already stated. Cooperation, dignity, international integrity. These are all at the heart of what we understand to be the global order. And, as I said, we must do everything in our power to implement and universalize these ideologies. They are fundamentally, universally good. So, if most of the population of the planet is deceived into believing the accounts of a supposedly benevolent entity, then it is in the pursuit of truth that we must investigate what this individual has been up to. I'll take your point.
Yeah, on that point, well, you talk about deception, you talk about the population being deceived that there's a good God. Well, how do you know that there is a bad God? How do you know that God must be bad, that any God must be bad? Would you elaborate? Because I feel like that's really missing.
I'll be honest, that is what I whenever I first read the motion, what I imagined, I had this idea of this, fedora-wearing, guardian-reading, katana-wielding guy who would go up and immediately prescribe the values given to him by Richard Dawkins. But what I would implore, rather, is that irregardless of the result of such a trial, we should do our best to collaborate and acquire information, and then use that to make an evidence-based decision that everyone can accept, which may or may not exist, but it is of our duty to do at least endeavour on it. So, furthermore, I will develop the idea of the red lines that were stated earlier, such as justice and freedom, and the ability to wake up in your own sick Wetherspoons on Friday morning. This idea is fundamental to British democracy. The idea that we are all equal and that we all must be held accountable to our own standards.
On that point, sir.
Okay, fair.
As Her Majesty, who I mentioned earlier, is considered the point of justice in the British system, I can put it that our system already acknowledges inequality, and some people are Republican.
Well, but that does not discount the idea that whenever we come forming our political decisions, or ones which actually affect practical issues, that there is an equal responsibility, not just a right, to get involved in public decision making. So, carrying that onward, the British idea of fair play can be seen at work in such a trial. So, to summarise what our government case so far has been, we would implore the creation of a public inquiry perhaps along the lines of recent recent ones. And we would when we would do this mainly to implement not just our international obligations to fundamental values, but also in order to truly understand who this shady, mysterious individual who seems to have such colossal influence over how we organise our day-to-day lives. And on that, I rest the government's case.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to continue the case for the...
Thank you, Madam President, members of the government. A couple of points of rebuttal, first of all. The point of legal jurisdiction was brought up. You asserted or affirmed that such a deity would fall within any legal jurisdiction, particularly that of the United Nations. But I would contend that to extend the jurisdiction of a court after the fact is against the fundamental principles of justice. On that point, unless you, in case you want to criticise this, I would say therefore that the Nuremberg trials were unjust, in that the laws that they prosecuted did not exist at the time of the commission of the crime. Now, you also called the Word of God the world's best-selling confession, and I ask you, what court would find the Bible permissible as evidence? You yourself said it may or may not be true. If there is that question over the fundamental evidence in the prosecution's case, can the prosecution really bring forward a case if there one piece of evidence is so contested? And the point that you made about Saddam Hussein didn't warn the Kurds, or he did warn the Kurds, so therefore that doesn't matter. The point is, God was a lawmaker. Human beings fell within his jurisdiction. He was entitled to set out his laws and the penalties for breaking those laws. Sodom and Gomorrah brought it upon themselves by violating the acknowledged law of that jurisdiction. Yes.
Is that not as disgraceful victim blaming?
Only insofar as the concept of a criminal justice system with penalties is victim blaming. And if that is your argument, then you have a lot to answer about your idea to put God on trial. Now, to get in to the substance of my case, finally, and leave them. As we set out, there are logistical problems with putting God on trial. We mentioned a few. I would add that the very fact that we are using evidence unlikely to be permissible, the fact that we don't know where God lives, the fact that we don't even know if he exists, means we could not fulfill the legal principle. No, thank you. We could not fulfill the legal principle that to be in the public interest, a trial needs, or a prosecution needs a reasonable chance of success. If we don't even know if the accused exists, I would argue that there is no reasonable chance of success. Therefore, the prosecution is not in the public interest. It would be a legal nonsense, as I suggested, to put on trial an entity who is above the law. I brought up the British monarch. You may bring up to me the trial of Charles I, and I suggest that was a legal nonsense. Treason was defined as a crime against the person of the sovereign. The sovereign, therefore, cannot be held guilty of that. Now, even if we did... Go ahead.
By this point, Charles had been defeated in a war. He was no longer the sovereign. Oliver Cromwell was the new sovereign.
Well, Oliver Cromwell wasn't the sovereign yet, but the point is that I don't think a successful rebellion is any less treasonous than an unsuccessful. No, thank you. Now, we come now to the point of what do we do next? Even if we do get God into a courtroom, even if we do manage to convince him not to smite us all the first time questioning him, What will be the consequences of this trial? What sentence could we possibly pass? A custodial sentence would have no impact on God because he is ever present, or he is omnipresent. A fine would have no impact upon God. It's not even sure that he has any money, and if he does, he probably is not likely to run out.
On that point, sir.
A death penalty, no thank you, Mr. Secretary. A death penalty is unlikely to succeed. As the song goes, he is immortal, invisible, God only wise. It would bring the court into such disrepute as we set out if we cannot even enforce a conviction. Where does that lead us in the search for justice? And even if we were able to execute a sentence upon God, and even if we were able to get him into court and find him guilty, what implications would that have? God, if he exists, and we have to assume for the purposes of this that he does, otherwise there'd be no sense putting him on trial, does a lot of good stuff. He heals people. He brings peace. He saves humanity. Who's going to do that? Who's going to do that if you execute or fine or imprison him? Yes, please.
If I do a million good things but still murder someone in my basement, I'm still going to be put on trial for that murder in my basement.
Again, only if the prosecution is in the public interest, and if conviction risks damning humanity, as far as it is not in the public interest to proceed with such a prosecution. But more fundamentally, he gives people meaning in their lives. Even if there is no God, it is true that many people who come to the conclusion through simple reason that there is no value or meaning in the universe like to turn to religion as a way out of that, as a way to reassure them that in fact there is. Now, if it could be proven that not only does God exist, but he is also not who these people think he is, that he can be killed, that he can be imprisoned, that he can be found, what will that do to the faith that sustains so many of those human beings whose rights the proposition is so concerned with? Ladies and gentlemen, I rest the opening opposition space. Thank you.
The member of government to continue for the proposition of the case.
Dear ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Team Closing Government today is going to extend upon the case by Team Opening Government by bringing a bit more nuance, and this nuance is going to consist of not automatically assuming that God actually exists. What I'm going to start with is a couple of things on how this debate should be judged. Secondly, about the definitions that have been given and what we are going to run with in our case, and the definition we are giving, for example, to God, what definition we are giving to we as this house would. And then I'm going to go into the case why there's actually considerable benefits to putting God on a mock trial. So first of all, we think that this debate should be judged on the basis of which team actually provides you with the most realistic conception of God for the purposes of this debate. Second of all, which team can actually provide you why a trial would be legitimized or not be legitimized. And thirdly, whether or not, as already stated by opening opposition, this is actually going to have some benefits, whether there are going to be consequences to putting on a trial, or whether those consequences are good or bad. We're going to argue that they're very, very good indeed. So that definition. We got a definition by Finbar as first speaker, that the second speaker sort of gave a new definition. We're just going to go with the first speaker's definition because that's the first speaker's role in the debate. So we're going to use Finbar's definition of putting the Judeo-Christian God on trial. So if we were looking at the idea of God, we're not going to automatically assume that God exists. I think a lot of speakers in this debate already were doubting about the conceptual and technical difficulties with putting God on trial, right? I mean, what will we do when we finally get pass a sentence on God? Will we put him in a prison, whatever? What if God determines what morality is, and how can we ever negatively to put him on trial? What are the legal jurisdictions? Why would God even care what we do with him? And what happens if God doesn't even exist? How are you going to put a non-existent being on trial? We think that regardless of whether God actually exists or whether we actually exercise any kind of power over him, if he exists, we think that it's still very good to have this trial for a couple of reasons. We think that God is essentially something that is constructed by his followers. There's a lot written on God in theological scripture, in scripture itself, that is going together to create this idea in society of what God is, what God's laws are, what God's purposes, and what God's actions are in the Bible and later on in the form of miracles, etc. We think that these followers define God at the start of any religion, but this is a process that continues on. So later in the 14th century, you have people writing on God, in the 15th century and so on, and even today we have a lot of different interpretations of God, who God is, depending on which religion you belong to and which sect within that religion you belong to.
On that point,
in a moment. We think that this house is going to be a state, and we think that the court we're going to hold God on trial in is going to be a mock court, precisely because if God is a tangible being, we probably cannot exercise any power over him, and there's very likely, I'm personally convinced he doesn't actually exist, so that would be him. So why is it actually important that we put the idea of God rather than God as a tangible being on trial? We think that Judean Christian heritage has been at the fundamentals of much of Western thought and much of Western liberty thought, right? For example, one of the things that comes out of Christianity, which is not, for example, present in a lot of other cultures, is the early idea of non-cyclical time, like which facilitates the idea of progress thinking, which is at the basis of the Enlightenment, and we're still living in a post-Enlightenment world. We think that this entire idea of progress is also relatively important in this debate, right? Because even if the idea of God inspired many good deeds, we also think that the idea of God inspired many great deal of bad deeds, like hatred, bigotry, and injustice all over the world. And we see that we are currently living in a society where there's a tension with our religious heritage and our current liberal progressive ideas of thinking, right? Just to name two things, gay marriage and abortions are currently a huge debate in Northern Ireland, and mostly a lot of proponents or people against allowing gay marriage and abortion are putting their arguments in the religious spheres. So we're seeing that there's a large tension between secular mode of thought and religious mode of thought, and we want to put it as a state very clear which parts of Christianity, of the Judeo-Christian heritage, we actually still think are relevant to the state, are relevant to the modern world, and which parts are not. So how are we going to do this, right? How are we going to put any kind of idea there, which parts of this do we actually not find compatible with our current ideals, which parts do we actually do find compatible with our ideals? For this, we probably need some kind of highest possible proof, right? We probably need to hold some kind of court in which we look at the idea of God, in which we look at the idea of the Judeo-Christian religion, and see, all right, so under our current ideas, and under what we want to be doing as a society, we would probably condone this, and we would probably put him in trial for things like this, right? We would probably put God in trial for commanding the Israelite tribe to butcher another tribe they were at war with, to take their children away as slaves and to rape their women. We would probably see that this is something we would hold God accountable for in modern day society, and this is something that in a mock court we could convict God of doing. This has a couple of really good benefits. First of all, there's many religious people. I would dare to say that almost 100% of Christians and Jews living today would probably condone this type of acts as well, right? People are very, very aware of the fact that phrases like this are there in the Bible, are there in the Torah, and that it's something that is not compatible with how they think about the world. So they're very conscious about this, and they actually want to absolve God of these kinds of things. They want to actually have the mechanism that says, all right, we recognize that these are the things that we do not find compatible with our current society. We recognize these that we would put God on trial for these things. We would, as a consequence of doing that, we cannot really pass any kind of sentence on God, but we can allow this sort of mock trial to say, all right, we find God guilty of these and these and these things. So that provides clarity to us which parts of religion and which parts of the concepts of God are actually still viable in modern society, and absolve a lot of the tensions which are currently going on between people arguing different points on this. We see that if we provide that very, very Christian ideology of absolving people of their sins and then leading them to actually live a more virtuous life, a life that can be more meaningful. We can absolve God of his sins by putting him on trial, saying we can hold God accountable for this, but we also recognize that the idea of God is very important to a lot of people, that God gives a lot of meaning to people in their lives, and that we can actually seek to emphasize these parts while putting him on trial for these parts and taking that out of what we currently conceive to be good. Therefore, we would kill that part of God by putting it on trial, and we would improve society. Therefore, we have proven you a better and more logical conception of God. We have proved why it is justified to put him on trial, and we have proven to you that it has very good consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the member of the opposition to continue the debate.
First of all, I'd like to thank the member of the opposition for his speech. I have to admit, I felt rather well prepared until I heard it, and so I will do my best now. First, to respond with a few points to the leader of the opposition, and then also to go on to Kevin's wonderful speech, which I felt provided a mechanism and defined the motion in a way that perhaps was a bit more clear than the leader of the proposition. But before I do that, I would like to argue with the point that Finbar was just defining the motion as talking about the Judeo-Christian God. I think this was a more broad claim that God should be put on trial. First, we need to analyze. We have to understand what this motion. First, if we're talking about a Judeo-Christian God and saying he is evil, and then say we have to put him on trial, that's no more convincing than saying, okay, there's a tasty apple there.
On that one second, was a thing. And surely this is an example of how this song has ruled the
So with the proposition, I'm feeling split here because Kevin has attacked the idea of faith, and these guys have attacked the idea of a Judeo-Christian God for the most part, or a God in general. What I feel like if we are talking about a concept of some God, we need to clearly define what is good, how is it defined. If God is simply good, then he is rather arbitrarily not fit for, or he won't be put on, he can't be found guilty of anything by definition. So if we can't take that approach. If we take the other approach, we have to try and justify the idea of faith. We have to try and justify what benefits can faith have. And I think while religion has led to some bad things, I think a personal faith need not be a bad thing at all. If we have something like a very subjective set of experiences, each life is so individual, then of course we must leave room for things like feelings, things like freedom of conscience. And I feel like simply disbanding the whole notion of any faith in total is an unfortunate mistake. Yes, go ahead.
Well, we routinely do make critical judgments based on our understanding of justice and what people freely think. This is why we went to war in World War II against Nazism, an ideology that created violence.
The thing is, what we don't have is a conception of justice that has been presented by your side. And unfortunately, if we don't have that, until we have that, we cannot put God on trial for anything. If we are judging God based on our laws, then we need to provide evidence that he has broken such laws. If we are doing something else, if we're trying to find a universal, a general idea of good, then, well, what is it? I take your point. But here's an interesting thought experiment. Let's imagine there is a God. Let's imagine we really want to put a God on trial, even just a mock trial. Here's an interesting question. Could we really find God responsible for his actions? Could we find anyone ultimately responsible for their actions? let's imagine, how does God make his decisions? What are his decisions? What enables his decisions? What causes his decisions? This is the question about causality. It's a philosophical question. If we imagine God's decisions are caused by something, then eventually we get a regression of causes. We get causes going back and back and back and back. Eventually causes that may lead outside God, or causes that will have nothing to do with him. Yes?
Do you realize that in our case it doesn't actually matter if God is actually doing those things, but whether those things have been attributed to be God and are living on our current society as having been done by God?
Well, to some extent I can see your point. I mean, we would still imprison and punish a murderer even if we found him clinically insane, even though we would probably not punish him as much. But the problem is clearly that we still cannot prove that God or even anyone is ultimately responsible for their actions. This is a philosophical claim. It goes back to Galen Strawson, perhaps some of you might have read him. It's a very interesting thing, whether we believe in causality or we don't. If we believe God's actions are caused by definite things, we get a regression of causes that lead somewhere outside of God himself or herself. And if we believe instead that there is no causality, what do we have? Without causality, there's just randomness, there's just random things happening. And how can there be any desert? How can there be any punishment or reward in such a situation? Give me a case that there is truly ever a true way to make someone deserve something or to make someone...
Alright, on that point, sir.
Go ahead.
Surely the very point of the omnipotent God is that he is responsible for everything.
I'm not sure if God just is, how is he responsible for being? But you get this regression. Is God responsible for his? It goes backwards. Is God responsible for his what omnipotence? Is what caused that? And do you understand what I'm saying? It's a difficult case you're making, because either you're saying God just is and it just is that way, but if God just is omnipotent, why? Yeah. Well, sorry, I'm getting a bit lost here. I'd be happy to finish my case just by summarizing briefly. We first of all have had the idea of faith criticized, and if the opposition would like to make the case that faith is personal, if faith doesn't inflict damage on other people, it's perfectly acceptable thing. Why wouldn't it be? Indeed, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion has been a founding tenet of many of our governments, the United States most notably, and even indeed the lack of freedom of faith, freedom of conscience, has caused much trouble. I mean, think of the Spanish Inquisition, think of all these different things where people have been restricted from having the freedom to believe something for themselves. This is a critical point. Secondly, if we are really putting a God on trial, the opposition has not made it clear by what standards we're putting him on trial, and that God is ultimately responsible for the very thing that we're putting him on trial for. So I would like to end by making the case that however we want to interpret this motion, whether with Caravan's way or with Finbar's way, the point simply does not stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome the government whip to close the case for the proposition.
The extension speaker here on the opposition is that we've got this idea on our extension team of removing this personal context of faith. This is not what we're talking about at all. There's still a personal context for everybody. We don't disband the idea of faith. We don't disband the idea of God. However, we merely want to have a discussion on the parts of faith that do not fit with our current society and do not fit with our Western liberal values. So, my job here as the closing whip is to firstly sum up the debate, and then secondly to explain why we on the extension team have given a better argument and a more defined argument than the opening government. So firstly, we would like to stick to the idea of a Judeo-Christian God. This is what we promise. However, what we can mention is that even if our case is put into a different religious context, it can still hold. We can still have the idea of exploring faith within a trial, within the estate, in order to disband the parts and discuss the parts that do not fit with our society. So, we've provided this idea of a legitimate definition of God. The Judeo-Christian God, which is a construction which is under continual development and interpretation. On our side of the house, in the extension, we would establish a mock court in order to put the idea of God on trial. This construction of God that has inspired many good things, but has also inspired many bad things. We found this tension within our religious heritage and our Western values, and we've got no wish at all here to generalise. But there is an understanding that many of the arguments against certain Western liberal ideas, such as abortion and gay marriage, do come from a religious standpoint. So, we want to find these ideas of finding God guilty. We want to find these ideas that work for modern society and we can build upon to create a better modern society. We're not disputing the idea that God can improve, the idea of God can improve people and help us move forward as a society. What we are disputing is the idea of God that we are currently holding is not beneficial to that end. So, we do, in rebuttal to Jeremy's point about causality, we do believe in causality. However, there is a responsibility for the leader to understand and to take responsibility for the actions of the followers. The actions of the followers of God are the responsibility of the idea of God. If the construction of God did not exist and this idea of God did not exist, the actions of the followers would not happen, and therefore, causally, God takes responsibility for those ideas. At the moment, we've got even closing ops still working with the idea of the existence of God. Jeremy still says about the idea of the personal context of faith, but we've proven that this is not necessary. We've proven that this idea of God can only be an idea in the air. It doesn't need to be a tangible experience of God, a tangible God that we can put in the trial box and make to swear on his own Bible. This is an ideal, and we're working with this ideal, and we've proven that this, tangibility, this graspingness of God is not necessary.
On that point,
yeah, go on.
Given you've acknowledged the role of God in underpinning so many of our Western values and, I would argue, epistemology, does a trial of God such as this not risk destabilising its own foundation?
Okay, that's an interesting point. However, what I would argue there is this isn't a trial in that we're trying to, we're trying to find God guilty as such. What we're trying to do is use this trial in order to have a discussion. This isn't a trial to find, God has murdered this many people. But this is a trial of the idea of God and the idea to discuss and the idea to understand what it is that makes our society into this Western liberal society and how we can develop on those ideas and improve that society and move on as people, into a better society. And that works, with any context. We've had Jeremy say that this cannot just apply to a Judeo-Christian God. However, this can work with, any God at all. This can be applied to any context in order to improve and kind of change the ideals of society and to build on the ideals of society that we have. So I think this really is beneficial in any modern society. Okay, so to sum up, the opening proposition have kind of brought this idea of a Judeo-Christian God, but really, in our opinion, on the extension team, that's all they've really brought. The majority of their argument is pretty convoluted and it just goes round in circles. What we've tried to do is to improve on that, to build on that, and to bring this idea of a mock court and the idea of a legitimate idea of God and a construction and a continual development of God and we need to build and work on the ideals in order to improve our Western society. The point of clash really here is that God exists, and the opposition have continued to argue this idea of the existence of God, even though we have proven time and time again that this is not necessary for our case. And so therefore we win on this point of clash. And this argument, that basically kind of, we've refuted all of their arguments, and that we can stick to the idea of a Judeo-Christian God, or we can move to a further different type of God, and it still holds. The idea of this development and the idea of this improvement still holds. Causality does exist, but we agree with this idea of responsibility and this idea of development for minutes up. And I mean, there's this idea of the personal context for God, but we don't disband this idea of faith. We don't disband the religious beliefs of people. We just want to build on them. We just want to improve on our society and to continue with the development that Christianity has brought, or Judaism has brought. Oh, and that's time. And so, yeah, we just want to improve on the ideas that religion has brought to our society and improve on the building of our Western values. Thank you.
For the opposition, and the debate this evening is opposition whip. Thank you very much.
A very good evening to all distinguished members of the Griffith. The case is adamantly clear. My team members have very clearly shown that God can simply not be put on trial. To start with, I'd just like to focus on a couple of points of rebuttal before I extend the points made by the team members. First, I'd like to start with universal standards. Where do you draw the line with universal standards? We live in a world with different cultures, ethics, and ideas. What I might think is just and right might not be what yourselves think is just and right. And even though admittedly there are some terrible atrocities, that I think it's helpful for us to draw a distinction. Putting this level of power into us will open this avenue up to all kinds of level of manipulation.
On that point.
And just a bit of rebuttal for the propositions Matt, that you don't have to assume that God exists to put God on trial. Yes, you do. Like, there'd be no point of having a trial
on that point, sir. The solution is very clear. If God answers the summons, then he exists. If he doesn't respond to the summons, then we send him a fine.
Yeah. But like, for God to be accountable to something, though, you have to like accept that he exists. It's just a ridiculously flawed argument. And to Russell Gemma, who was talking about that, you're not disbanding faith by putting God on trial. Yes, you are. You're like fundamentally undermining what faith is. If you're a Christian, you believe you are here because of a God. Or if you're of any religion, in fact, it's...
On that point. Well, no. Basically, we're not we're not saying that you should disband the entire idea of faith. We're just saying we need to reassess it, Like, what Christians today believe, you shouldn't wear cotton on Sundays. We don't take the Bible literally anymore, We have moved on from it and we've developed it. So why can't we do that via a trial?
I believe there are fundamental aspects of the Christian faith which are safe. And I think in what you are doing, you are disbanding both. And also, so Gemma, you have set out how you think we should put God on trial and the practical considerations, but how is it fair that you, like, why should we have that power to make such a decision? Okay.
On that point? Well, as we defined, we have accepted the universality of very basic principles, not nuanced political philosophy. We're saying like the right to life, the right not to be strapped to an armchair and car battery to death. These are not particularly complex. They are that gives us the authority in these troubles.
But if life comes from God, do we have that authority? Okay. So, to extend the point of the Prime Minister, I completely agree, it would be an absolute logistical nightmare. I mean, how do we get in there? Who would get involved? Who would decide? Which country would decide to put him on trial? What judges would be worthy of putting God on trial?
We might have mentioned the United Nations and international law, or were we distracted by bumblebee?
Okay. I still come back to my original point. Like, do not think as humans we have the right to put God on trial. Okay. Also, to put the point that we're just focusing on a Christian God, if you want to do this to make society better and fairer, which I don't think it will do, and I will come to that towards the end of my speech. I should hope everybody here wants a society that is equal and fair, and surely we can't be prioritising one religion over another. Surely that is diminishing other people's faith.
On that point? Well, the case which we made was fundamentally that these crimes represent a roadblock to moving towards a society that embraces these ideals. You have to have doublethink, and that, as we consider, is a philosophical hangover.
Okay. As I'm going out of time, I'm going to move on to my conclusion and hopefully persuade you why we simply can't put God on trial. God is love. Christianity, Islam, and people of all religions have done so much good, as the team has. Both teams have quite rightly admitted, and there will simply be no point or benefit of putting God on trial. Like, how would it stop anything or progress anything? I really don't think this team have made the benefits of putting God on trial explicitly clear, because I don't think they are clear.
We shall give the judges time to deliberate. Any idea on PTA? They're going to try and do it 10 minutes.
Can I just mention, Robbie?
Yes.
I'm really proud to propose.
Nothing we have there. So this was recorded by the judges at all. This isn't really consequential, but for the sake of the debate, do we have any questions for the proposition this evening and any of the arguments that they have made? No.
I would have a question to the first speaker who put forward the idea of bringing out the Christian God. My point would be, if you're saying that you're bringing a Judeo-Christian God to court, that would mean you believe in him. Would it not make more sense then to convert to Christianity? There actually is a wide case history of people trying to bring that God to trial. Job's friends, David, Moses, and you can see how their verdicts end up.
If you like, you can have one from each team to respond. So, Harry or Finn, if you'd like to go first.
Sorry, the question was?
Clarification.
If you are bringing God of Judea or Christianity to court, that means you believe in him. Would it not make more sense, given the historical account of search for God, to convert to Christianity?
For us to convert to Christianity?
For yourself, or you're going to bring
Oh, that was the point I made as I was speaking, that as we live in a Western world, which is largely Christian, it just makes sense from our point of view to put the Christian God, or the Judeo-Christian God, on trial. There can be other mechanisms for, Allah and Moses, Mao, Ayatollah Khomeini, and Judi Dench.
But we think it makes particular sense. We think it makes particular sense on the metric of our case that you try a God in which you also actually believe. So you can try a God if you don't believe in it and say, all right, we think that these elements of this particular religion, of this particular conception of God, fit in with the way we want to organize our society. But also particularly if you are religious and believe in a certain God, that you strictly and critically evaluate which parts of that religion you actually adhere to, or which parts of that conception of God you actually would find condemnable if it were actually in that court, and allow that sort of mock process to be an evaluation of which part of that religion you adhere to and which part you condemn.
Opening opposition, all one of you?
Well, it depends. Obviously, to a certain extent, I agree with the question. The fundamentals are, if God does exist, can't put him on trial. If he doesn't, can't put him on trial.
Closing off, brief rebuttal, somebody first?
I have to agree with Henry. What it really boils down to, I think, is that if God did exist, and I think your point was much, it didn't need so much discussion. If the Judeo-Christian God really existed, then putting him on trial wouldn't accomplish much. But I take the point of the closing proposition.
Okay, any questions for the opposition? Really? Not all? Any abstaining on the motion? Anyone would like to make any check? Oh, sorry. Each of you.
Richie?
Oh, sorry. Well, we'll go with Richie. I'm off the opposition. Okay, well, I'm off the opposition first.
Okay, so you've brought up the case of how impossible it is to bring God to trial, which is fair enough. I mean, the likelihood of God actually existing in some minuscule way, that's very unlikely. But what would your thoughts on bringing the leaders of the faiths in question to trial and speak for
God?
Well, it's not strictly relevant to the motion, I suppose, but I can give you my personal view. I wouldn't, because I think that would still assume one way or another, because if you brought, for example, the Pope to trial for the Crusades, then you're assuming that God doesn't exist, because the buck should stop with him. And a central argument from our side was the impossibility of knowing either way. That's a sort of response.
Closing up? You don't have to say anything.
Well, I mean, I think it's a separate question. Putting a person on trial is something we might do, and we should do, in accordance with our laws. But because God is such an abstract concept, I mean, we don't see a God, we don't feel a God, at least most people don't. I think it's a different issue. But yeah, so yes, but maybe not. Maybe that doesn't fit into this context of the debate.
Open to go.
Well, that is effectively what you said is the plot of a film starring Billy Connolly entitled "The Man Who Sued God," and I think I remember that word out pretty well for him. But in any kind of trial, the defendant is represented, and unless they represent themselves, which doesn't happen very often, you will be represented by your lawyers, and in this case I imagine God's lawyer would be Pope Francis.
Going on.
I mean, that doesn't really fit with our definition of promotion. Our definition of promotion was to define the concept of God, and to put the concept of God on trial, so therefore that would be the correct equivalence.
Aish, you have an extended point?
Yeah, I suppose my point was there's maybe just like a massive elephant in the room. No one has mentioned the statute of limitations.
What?
So, how far back are you going to go? Because, or is it just something like since the UN has been enforced, the things that God has interfered with done?
Would opening God like to address the elephant?
That's a bit harsh.
That's really good.
Oh my god.
As the proposition has defined, we'll have a public inquiry into historical crimes. But if we take that and just deal with the crimes that are being committed on behalf of the leader of the organisation, such as just out of curiosity, the Lord's Army in Nigeria, which are religiously inspired by the radical writings and teachings of this mysterious individual, then if we draw that forward, then surely then he's still responsible for crimes. Although if we're dealing with specifically with how far it should go back, with even as no matter how you define that, he's still responsible for crimes today. So,
where we go?
I think we actually sort of addressed the elephant in the room during our speeches by saying that we are really looking at the technical, legal possibilities of actually putting God on trial and looking at a raid. We hold him accountable for the murder of these people and doing this and this like a long time ago. But we're looking at how we pass moral judgments on things that happened a long time ago, and we argue that that's something we actually already do every single day. When looking back at these things were done at that time, would we still agree with them if they were happening now? So in that sense, we think it's justified to look at those things.
Yeah, I think it's an important point in terms of time frame. If God is eternal, well, that's an awful lot of evidence to consider. And of course, in this trial, we wouldn't want to give him a sentence that was below what he deserves. Sorry, I made the assumption that it's a he, anyway. Also, thank you. We also have to consider that the laws that apply here may not even exist there, because that might be beyond our reality.
Yeah. Do we have an extradition treaty with heaven?
You don't have to make a point for one.
You sure you don't? I think all this been said.
Yeah. Do we have any more abstaining points? After Aisha's first question.
Yes. Can I make an abstaining point in saying that I would really have liked opening government to stand up and say, all right, we are Satan and we're putting God on trial because we're involved in this long battle of good and evil. And we brought down.
Oh, it's civil war. Opening God, would you like to respond?
Right. Although I will say, what was really wrong with Satan? I mean, he was the one who introduced Adam and Eve to knowledge and an awareness of themselves and the world around them. And God cast them out for that. And not only did he cast them out, this is the point I wanted to make earlier. He is a sovereign that is ruled in the most arbitrary of ways. If to George Bush and Tony Blair acted like this. We would put them on trial. There'd be mass protests in the streets. In fact, there have been calling to put them on trial. God is the worst kiss of a sovereign ruling by his own morality, his own inclination, without consideration of anything else. And I bring back to the point of the fig. Eve ate the fig, and so she received the harshest punishment. Her punishment was that her and her descendants would all experience the pain of childbirth.
Thank you.
And how could that be accepted in any courtroom?
A very, very brief one to conclude.
She was warned.
Was she in at the time?
No, back and forth.
Thank you for that enthralling, I think, productive debate.
Which question did you go on to?
Just leave it.
Grand, okay, so we're going to take, I think we're going to go for a vote first and then we'll elect a winner after that. So it's an individual winner. So we will go for a vote, based on your personal opinion. So anybody can vote this. So if you agree with the proposition and you think that God should be put on trial, please raise your hand and say aye.
You're fucking right.
Fingers. Where's the board?
Hands high, please.
5. And
Yes, the opinion.
yes, it's public. It's your opinion.
Oh.
6.
No.
Oh.
5.
It's 5. And all of those who think that God should not be put on trial, please raise your hand and say nay.
Really? Decorum, please.
10. And all of those who abstain on the motion, don't really care whether God's put on trial. Think both, think neither.
I think you really should have an opinion.
Okay, and this vote is for members only. So if you all have your shiny membership cards, which Graham searches frantically for every.
Can I have my membership?
Do you want? Do you want to
Pay for it, you know what I mean?
Yes.
No.
I have 3 to choose from. Pick your future president.
Pass one
Guys. Right, okay. This is based on the House's opinion of speaker ability, and it's based per side. So if you think that the proposition, these guys spoke best tonight, please raise your membership cards and say aye. You can vote for yourselves as
Just
well.
me.
And all those who think the opposition spoke better tonight, please raise your hands. Say nay. Is this a vote?
Because God said that's the most lackluster
Is that a vote?
I've ever seen in the past.
Nope.
This is like an EU parliament.
And all those who think the
Shy Tory.
Finbar,
Sorry.
please. Oh.
Sorry, he's
Stop and hurt. No, I don't care. We're going to vote. Okay. All of those who think that both sides spoke equally good or equally rubbish, please raise your hand and say meh.
Why does it have to be negative?
9. I said equally good or equally rubbish.
Well, to be fair, it was the same.
It's like a way of annoying.
We should think of
So I believe that you both spoke equally well / equally rubbish.
Nice.
Abstaining the motion. So we will move to the individual speaker / winner of the Dufferin medal, going 167 seconds. So James.
I thought it was an interesting debate, as usual debate. If any of the individual speakers or anyone in the audience would like to come and talk to us about our decision or what we think we can do better after the debate, we're free to do so. Now I'm going home because I'm cold, so catch me quickly. We did, however, come to a unanimous decision. We think the best team tonight was closing government, and of the 2 speakers, we chose Carol.
Yes. just wait for the explanation of where the Dufferin medal is. So well done. Thank you very much for that debate, and we're all going to the house bar afterwards now. I heard you asking that earlier, so So please join us next week for This House with John Hammett as well. So thank you very much.
done, chaps.
Well done, Jim.
Well done.
Accused of crime.
I thought you were the best keeper as well as
And to all the other speakers, we offer a firm handshake.